The Harlem Renaissance period. Now, when I was a little girl, I was obsessed with the Harlem Renaissance period. The clothes, the poetry, the music, the art, the black unity, the black love. It don't mean a thing if you ain't got that swing. Do-wop, 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 do-wop. The Harlem Renaissance period spanned roughly from the 1910s to the mid-1930s and was a transformative cultural movement centered in Harlem, in New York City. It marked a period of profound artistic, intellectual, and social growth for our black community. The Harlem Renaissance was a significant cultural rebirth that gave birth to a vibrant and influential artistic tradition, laying the foundation for the modern Black American culture. Because as we all know, we are the culture. Everybody wants to be like us, but nobody wants to get treated like us. That's the difference. Now, the roots of the Harlem Renaissance began mostly due to the Great Migration that began in 1916. The movement of Black Americans from the rural South to urban areas in the North, particularly New York City, which led to the concentration of Black intellectuals, musicians, writers, and artists in Harlem. World War I also played a role in the beginnings of the Harlem Renaissance because many Black men served in the military, and the war experience contributed to a new sense of identity. Black soldiers were forced through the draft to fight for a country that simultaneously denied them full rights and subjected them to racial segregation and discrimination. The contradictions they faced upon returning led to a heightened sense of racial pride and a stronger push for civil rights. Black soldiers were less willing to accept the racism of the United States. So now picture it, Harlem, 1920. Harlem in the early 20th century was primarily a working class community for Black people, but by the early 1920s, it had become the epicenter of Black culture. Folks like W.E.B. Du Bois helped organize the Niagara movement and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, known as the NAACP, which supported the intellectual and cultural advancement of Black people. At this time, we also had Marcus Garvey's UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and they promoted Black pride, Pan-Africanism, and the idea of separate but equal, influencing the Renaissance's cultural climate. Between 1920 and 1925, the Harlem Renaissance truly began to flourish during this period, both in terms of artistic output and its influence on mainstream American culture. For literature, we had writers such as Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Claude McKay, Countee Cullen, writing poems, novels, short stories, and essays that explored the Black experience, celebrating Black culture and challenging racial stereotypes. Langston Hughes became one of the most iconic voices with works like The Negro Speaks of Rivers, which goes a little something like this. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep in the rivers. I bathe in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans. And I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. See? Beautifully capturing the essence of Black people and our experience and our history of being here since the beginning of time. And then don't even get me started on music. The Harlem Renaissance is known for its connection to jazz, blues, and gospel. Artists like Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Bessie Smith, Fats Waller created a new sound that captivated not only Black folks, but also white audiences. Harlem's Cotton Club, the Savoy, and the Apollo Theater became the epicenter of this music. Bessie Smith, known as the Empress of Blues, became the highest paid Black performer of her time. And Duke Ellington turned jazz into an art form, establishing his place in music history. The Renaissance influenced the world theater. The cultural boom in Harlem gave Black actors opportunities for stage work that had previously been withheld. At the center of this stage revolution was the versatile Paul Robeson, an actor, singer, writer, and activist. Robeson believed that art and culture were the best paths forward for Black Americans to overcome racism and make advances in white-dominated culture. And then we have Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker spent her youth in poverty before learning to dance and finding success on Broadway. In the 1920s, she moved to France and soon became one of Europe's most highest paid performers. Then we had the visual arts. The visual arts were never welcome into Black artists, with art schools, galleries, and museums shutting them out. The most celebrated Harlem Renaissance artist is Aaron Douglas, often called the father of Black American art, who adapted African techniques to realize paintings and murals as well as book illustrations. And other visual artists like Archibald Motley, Malou Jones explored themes of African heritage, race, and identity, producing works that challenged existing racial stereotypes and celebrated Black American culture. And Black people during the Harlem Renaissance faced widespread systemic racism. Black people were subjected to segregation and disenfranchisement and violence under the Jim Crow laws. And that racism led to brutal treatment of Black people, especially in the form of lynchings. Black intellectuals like Du Bois and activists like Ida B. Wells worked tirelessly to bring attention to these atrocities. Black people were excluded from many economic opportunities, particularly in white-dominated industries. Black performers, artists, and intellectuals often faced discrimination in securing jobs or compensation equivalent to their white counterparts. Black artists and performers were often limited to roles that reinforced negative stereotypes, such as Mammy. Despite the rise of influential Black intellectuals and organizations, Black Americans had limited political power due to the Jim Crow laws. The end of Harlem's creative boom began with the stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression. It wavered until Prohibition ended in 1933, which meant that white patrons no longer sought out illegal alcohol in uptown Black-owned clubs. Though the Harlem Renaissance formally ended with the Great Depression, the artistic and intellectual contributions made by Black people during this period laid the foundation for future generations of Black artists, activists, and thinkers. The works created during this time influenced the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, and they continue to be celebrated as important milestones in our Black history. Think about this. Malcolm X was born right at the height of the Harlem Renaissance, May 19th, 1925. For me, the Harlem Renaissance period is proof of what we could build through our unity. We just have to find our way back to each other. Stop letting the enemy divide us through religion and classism and colorism and all these ridiculous diaspora wars. And remember what Malcolm said. Remember who taught you to hate yourself. The fact remains, the only way out for us is together, by any means necessary together. Global Black unity is the only answer. I love you, Black man. I love you, Black woman. Knowledge is power. Power to the people.